House is expected to vote on making the documents public, which could include records on Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell and others. A Russian missile strike has killed one in Kharkiv's Berestyn and has wounded at least 9. Meanwhile, Russia says its air defenses shot down 31 Ukrainian drones overnight. In Donetsk, Ukrainian attacks hit 2 power plants, causing widespread outages. Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that he will urgently convene a meeting of his cabinet ministers to ensure Israelis behind the latest attacks against Palestinians in the West Bank are brought to justice. In a post on X, Netanyahu has called on authorities to deal with the rioters in accordance with the law. Defense Minister Israel Katz, in a separate statement, has emphasized that the Israeli government in the coming weeks would approve a landmark decision to allocate resources and funding that he expected would have a significant impact addressing the violence. This comes as homes and vehicles have been torched in Jabba, which is a Palestinian village near Bethlehem, after an earlier attack on property and civilians in the village of Sair. Israel has been under mounting international pressure to curb these attacks on Palestinians in the West Bank. With us on the broadcast is Sasha Machta, political commentator, joining us from Jerusalem. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. We've been seeing the spate of attacks taking place. Houses have been torched, civilians have been attacked as well. Netanyahu now coming down, vowing to crack down on violence in the West Bank. What more can we expect from the Israeli government as far as these measures are concerned?
So yeah, the images coming out of the West Bank are, first of all, absolutely shocking. Definitely not representative of most of the 500,000 Israelis living in West Bank, Judea and Samaria. But these images have been disgusting all Israelis. So the reports coming out of Israel are that there are at least around 200 young extremists, violent extremists that have been carrying out these activities, where around 70 are the most extreme. And of course, it's been a problem that's been increasing in the past months. There are several measures that will be taken. It still hasn't been handled in a proper way. It hasn't been taken seriously, but in the past weeks we've seen more and more high-profile politicians and army officials come out against this, because Israelis understand that first and foremost these young and violent extremists are harming Israelis and innocent Palestinians, of course, but the damage that they're causing to us is very, very severe. So it needs to be handled accordingly. My hope is that the administrative detention that was previously removed will be brought back. That way, these 200 or more could be stopped before they take action. But since it's not one organized group, it's more individual acts of a few or of one crazy person, that it might be hard to locate them as one group. So what's going to happen is we're going to see more efforts by the army to crack down, probably putting soldiers in areas with friction, and actually dedicate some resources to this, which hasn't been done in the past. But the problem is great, and we all recognize it. Israelis recognize it, and the settlement leaders recognize it. Actually, the other day, we saw the leader Yossi Dagan come out against these extremists, and my hope is that this is a phenomenon that we won't see anymore and that proper measurements will be taken.
Absolutely. Requesting you to stay on with us as we track further developments. We're now learning that an Israeli government spokeswoman has stated that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made it clear that Palestinians from Gaza should be allowed to leave the territory and return to it freely. Shosh Bedrosian has made these comments during a briefing with foreign journalists in Jerusalem. Listen in.
South Africa's government has raised concerns about the arrival of a plane load of Palestinians from Gaza, with officials there saying the matter was under investigation. Steve, I'm reading the remaining response in question that you have here, specifically talking about Palestinians ending up in South Africa. I don't have much I can share with you on that, but the Prime Minister has made it clear that if Palestinians want to leave, they should be allowed to leave the Gaza Strip. And if they want to come back to the Gaza Strip, they should also be allowed to come back.
Earlier, South Africa's Foreign Affairs Minister Ronald Lamola had stated that the government is investigating the arrival of a plane carrying Palestinians, calling the circumstances suspicious. Authorities granted entry to the 130 passengers who arrived without travel papers. In other news, US President Donald Trump has hailed the UN Security Council's recent vote in favor of his proposed Gaza peace plan, describing it as a milestone that will lead to further peace all over the world. In a post on Truth Social, Trump has celebrated the vote, which saw 13 member nations backing the US drafted resolution, while Russia and China abstained but did not veto. Notably, there were, as I mentioned, no vetoes, marking a rare moment of unanimous support in the Council. Take a look.
The result of the voting is as follows: 13 votes in favor, 0 votes against, 2 abstentions. The draft resolution has been adopted as Resolution 2803.
The plan includes the establishment of a board of peace, which Trump has described in a speech in Washington as one of the most significant initiatives ever undertaken by the United Nations. He's emphasized that the board would include not only himself, but also leaders from very important and respected nations. Take a look.
The Board of Peace, and it's going to be comprised of myself and leaders of other very important nations and very respected nations, and it's going to be something I think is going to be very important. It was just approved. It was just endorsed by the United Nations. It was pretty great. It's a big thing. I think it's one of the most important things the United Nations will ever do, actually.
The resolution also calls for the deployment of an international peacekeeping force in Gaza, a move aimed at stabilizing the region. Now, following the vote, the US has hailed this decision as historic and constructive, signaling a shift towards greater international cooperation in addressing the long-standing conflict. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Sasha Machta. What's interesting is that there was near unanimous assent to this particular decision. 13 ayes, 2 abstentions, and no vetoes from Russia or China for that matter. How significant then is this particular decision, and how do you read into the numbers specifically as far as this vote is concerned?
So first, this is an incredible success of the Trump administration, and of course Donald Trump deserves credit for getting basically all the nations of the world to agree, or in the case of Russia and China, to abstain to this plan. If we look at the situation a little bit over a year ago or a few months ago, this was never in sight. We would never have imagined that the nations of the world would come together in the UN, a place that had spewed so much hate towards the state of Israel, to actually vote on a resolution that is creating an international cooperation, an international stabilization force to actually come in and disarm Hamas. So Trump's ability to get these nations, including Arab moderate nations, to agree to Hamas disarmament is an incredible success. The question that remains is, will the ISF that enters Gaza, will they be willing to fight and disarm Hamas? This is the question that's been coming up a lot in the past few weeks, as Jordanian leader has already said that it's not going to be an international stabilization force, it's going to be a peacekeeping force. So does that mean that they are only going to enter once Hamas is disarmed? And if so, what leverage does Trump have over Hamas for them to disarm? Hamas has already rejected the plan. They've been the only party to reject the plan. Of course, this plan would have essentially ended the suffering of the people of Gaza and allowed for a better future to be built. But as always, Hamas remains the key obstacle to this. So the ISF yesterday got an endorsement by the nations of the world. The vote was practically an endorsement of the Trump plan and kind of a certificate of approval to turn it from policy, from paper into action. It's getting the endorsement of the UN. So now we'll see, hopefully, nations such as Indonesia, hopefully Emiratis, Saudis, and regional players, not Qatar and Turkey, of course, sending troops into Gaza. Maybe this will be only in the yellow side of Gaza for now, because the US has been floating this possibility of two Gazas, one in the Israeli yellow side. Of course, Israel will retire slowly from that territory, but under the IDF-controlled yellow line, and then where Hamas still remains, their last stronghold in the red side. So for sure, we're going to see in the next weeks, hopefully, troops entering the yellow side and actually helping Israel in disarming or removing the last of Hamas's facilities on the yellow side, but on the red side, that's going to be more complicated. So that's going to be a question and something to keep an eye out. How and what leverage is going to be used to disarm Hamas on the red side? And will the peacekeeping force, will the ISF be willing to actually confront Hamas fully, or just serve as a peacekeeping force?
Absolutely. Requesting you to stay on with us. You, of course, addressed a very crucial point. I'd like to expand on that a little bit. Hamas has, in fact, rejected the UN Security Council's recent Gaza resolution. Hamas has insisted that resistance against Israel is legitimate. It has rejected calls to disarm. It has criticized the proposed deployment of an international peacekeeping force, claiming that it undermines the neutrality and sides with Israel. Additionally, Hamas has described the resolution as an imposition of international trusteeship on Gaza, and they've stated that this move is opposed by Palestinians and local factions, asserting that it fails to address Palestinian rights and demands. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Sasha Machta. You have, of course, addressed this, but what's also interesting is that we've also recently seen a statement by the UAE. It had ruled out joining the stabilization force, although it does continue to back these peace efforts. How do you analyze the UAE's position? Of course, the UAE is a signatory to the Abraham Accords. Could this then be some sort of signal that it's sending to Israel and the Arab nations at large?
I think the signal that the UAE is sending is that they want to have no role in sending troops as long as Hamas is still present in Gaza. The UAE, more than anyone, except maybe the Saudis, has their own experience with the Muslim Brotherhood. They have experience with derooting and with de-radicalizing this horrible ideology from their society. And I think that given their knowledge and understanding of these risks and implications of dealing with the Muslim Brotherhood, they don't want to send troops on the ground to actually confront Hamas, which is totally legitimate. It's understandable, and Israel, more than anyone, also understands that the concerns that the UAE might have with this. So, of course, it's our hope that the UAE will send troops because this is our strongest ally and partner in the region, but it's understandable. That being said, we see that the UAE will have a tremendous role to play in terms of the de-radicalization of the Gaza Strip. If we thought Hamas was the only problem, it's not. It's also the ideology that Hamas has been teaching and injecting in the youth of Gaza, and the UAE actually has experience with de-radicalization. So we hope that they're going to be a key player in the de-radicalization of the Gaza Strip, which will allow for a better future of coexistence between Israel and Gazans.
All right, with that said, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, sharing your perspective and analysis with us on NewsX World today. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus to what's taking place in Iraq. Prime Minister Mohammad Shia al-Sudani's bloc has won the most seats in Iraq's parliamentary election. Final results, of course, showcase that he has taken about 46 of 329 seats. But forming a new government could still take months, especially amidst political wrangling. Meanwhile, the Taqadam party has won 27 seats. Former Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's State of Law group secured 29, and the Kurdistan Democratic Party took 26. Overall, voter turnout reached just over 56%. Shiite ruling alliance parties say that they remain the largest bloc and plan to nominate a prime minister for the next phase. Soudani is seeking a second term. He presents himself as a reformer aiming to stabilize Iraq after years of unrest. So with us on the broadcast is Mr. Peter Baum, editor of the Weekly Blitz, joining us from London. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World today. Crucial results of a very important election in Iraq. But of course, we do know that al-Soudani's bloc, his party has taken 46 of 329 seats, and therefore he does face the challenge of forming a coalition. Some analysts say that a stable government formation could perhaps take a few weeks or even months for that matter. He does position himself as a reformist, so bringing different parties to his line is a major challenge as well. How long do you foresee this entire process to take?
Yeah, there are three major difficulties facing Soudani and his ability to form a coalition government. The first one is how politically astute he is in being able to bring those other parties, the number of seats that you've just mentioned, together within that coalition. I think those representing the Kurdish bloc will certainly join with him, and the Sunni bloc represented by the former Prime Minister and another party may have more difficulty with that, but nevertheless the main hurdle for him will be his political astuteness in bringing those blocs together to form a coalition. Now, if he can do that, he then faces two major challenges. The first one being the Shia cleric party of the Sadrist party, who boycotted the elections, and as you know, they are very much aligned with the influence of Iran.
Yes.
Now, they could cause havoc given that they are form a very strong bloc of voters within Iraq itself. And at the moment, they have been eerily silent on commenting on the elections. They've boycotted, we know, and it's difficult to know what they are going to do should a coalition seem to have been formed. That's the second hurdle. The third hurdle is going to be very difficult for him, and that's there are a number of Iraqi militias of all different shapes and forms, independent militias funded by various players within the region, funded by Turkey, funded by the Emiratis, funded by Qatar, funded by Iran, and undoubtedly some funded by the United States, who has a presence in the region. So those three hurdles for anyone trying to form a coalition are going to be very difficult to cross, and hence the reason why many analysts are suggesting that it may take weeks, if not months, if at all, to form a coalition that has the credibility and has the support to govern Iraq on the basis of the results of the election that we've just witnessed.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, and this election, the run-up to this election has witnessed several scandals, including a revelation on the 19th of August regarding a network of spies operating within the Prime Minister's office. Meanwhile, there was a scandal as well involving the embezzlement of around $2.5 billion in public funds. All of these came in the run-up to the elections, yet we do see the 56% voter turnout and the fact that al-Soudani's party has got the maximum amount of seats. Since you mentioned Iran, taking all of this into context, how can a fragmented parliament, one that has witnessed quite a lot of tensions in the run-up to the polls, sort of shape Iraq's ability to address these very real security concerns regarding extremism, regarding Iranian influence, and curb potential sort of efforts to create unrest within Iraq?
Yeah, well, okay, so the first question was regarding the ability to form a coalition, and I said that there were three major hurdles which I've outlined. Of course, the fourth major one is the as you've quite mentioned, the number of scandals leading up to the election, financial scandals, etc. Now, it will have to be up to the political astuteness of the potential Prime Minister and his cabinet to negotiate their way round those scandals. We know that Iraq has been pillaged by stealing funds from, it's an oil-rich country, we know that. And we also know that the corruption within Iraq, whether it's from the days of pre-Saddam or post-Saddam, has been just a mess full of whichever government's in charge, pillaging the country of its wealth, and some Iraqi individuals, politicians and army generals being made very, very wealthy. So the key, the fourth hurdle, if you like, is the ability of the incoming Prime Minister to be able to negotiate his way around these scandals, some of which indeed have affected some of his closest friends, I'm sure, and those in power in other parties. And if he can find a way to negotiate a compromise, maybe hanging out to dry some individuals who are clearly responsible for the wealth pillage of Iraq, then they still have a chance. But that's why so many analysts, including myself, are suggesting that it will take weeks, if not months, to form this coalition together, because there are some huge hurdles for this incoming administration to cross over.
Indeed, sir. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, putting all of that into perspective for our viewers. On that note, we're shifting focus to news coming in. Now, according to reports, 11 people have been detained in connection with the deaths of 4 members of the same family from suspected poisoning in Istanbul. A Turkish-German woman, her husband, and their 2 children who were on a holiday from Germany fell ill last week after eating several popular street food dishes in Istanbul. They were taken to hospital, but the 2 children died the very next day. Their mother passed away 2 days later. Istanbul prosecutors opened an investigation, initially focusing on suspected food poisoning. But evidence has since emerged that the family may have been exposed to pesticides in the hotel where they were staying. Among those detained are 5 food sellers, the hotel's owner and 2 staff, and 3 people from the pest control company. Well, viewers, due to paucity of time, it's a wrap on Gulf Today. We will continue to track these developments very, very closely. On that note, a quick short break.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. President Donald Trump makes a sharp U-turn and now urges House Republicans to release the Epstein files as many prepare to defy his earlier demands. Trump says on Truth Social that the party should move on and focus on economic issues, calling the controversy a Democrat hoax. The United Nations says the conviction of former Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is an important moment for victims, but should not have included a death sentence. The UN Rights Office also questions whether her trial in absentia met international fair trial standards due to due process. Japan moves to ease a growing row with China after Beijing warns its citizens against travelling there amid tensions over Taiwan. The dispute flared after Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi said a Chinese attack on Taiwan could trigger a Japanese military response. The BBC says it will fight any legal action from President Trump and insists there is no basis for a defamation case over its editing of his January the 6th speech. Trump threatens a $5 billion lawsuit claiming the broadcaster's edit created the false impression that he called for violence. Presidents Macron and Zelensky sign a letter of intent for Ukraine to acquire up to 100 Rafale jets and new air defense systems from French firms. Paris says the deal, spanning about 10 years, includes future contracts for SAMP-T systems, radars and drones to bolster Ukraine's war effort. At least 45 Indian pilgrims are feared dead after a bus crash near Medina in Saudi Arabia, with only one survivor undergoing treatment. Indian officials say a 24/7 control room is now active in Jeddah as Telangana's chief minister seeks urgent coordination with Riyadh. The death toll in the November the 10th Delhi blast near the popular tourist site Red Fort has now risen to 15, as 2 more people injured in the blast succumbed to their injuries earlier today. The death toll from a Russian missile strike on Balaklia in eastern Ukraine rises to 3, with 10 others wounded overnight. Local officials say the attack hit the city during the night and emergency crews are still working at the scene. We start this hour in Europe, and the Russian Defense Ministry reported that Russian troops had captured 2 key villages in eastern Ukraine. The first, Dvorchistansky, is located in the Kharkiv region, where soldiers were seen raising the Russian flag over a heavily damaged building. The location was confirmed through satellite imagery, although the exact date of the video couldn't be independently verified. The second, Hai, located in the Dnipropetrovsk region, was also claimed by Russian forces on the same day. Satellite imagery matched the features of the location, but again, the precise date of the video could not be confirmed. Since late June, Russian forces have expanded their control in both Dnipropetrovsk and neighbouring Zaporozhye regions, marking significant advances, with reports indicating that they have moved forward by at least 30 kilometres in recent weeks. Joining us now is Gilbert Doctorow. He's a Russia affairs expert and he joins us live from Brussels. Gilbert, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. Gilbert, Russia says it's advancing in both Dnipropetrovsk and in Kharkiv. From your vantage point, is this genuine momentum here by Moscow's forces?
Oh, it is momentum, but the notion that the war will end in 3 weeks with a Russian victory is utter nonsense. Of course, anything can happen, but a political collapse in Ukraine cannot be dismissed, considering the scandalous goings-on, political repercussions of the bribery, of the corruption that has been found in the midst of the Kiev government. However, looking strictly at the military, Russia has a long way to go before it reaches the Dnieper River, which more or less divides the country into 60% West Ukraine and 40% East Ukraine, not to mention taking the whole country. So the notion of a Russian all-out victory coming from these incremental gains of a settlement here and a settlement there is not obvious or persuasive. Looking at the two different locations that you've mentioned, Dnipropetrovsk, which is farther to the west, and Kharkiv, which is right on the border with Russia. I would say that for the Russian purposes of ensuring their own security, or any settlement comes out of this war, the gains in Kharkov Oblast are much more important. Kharkov was used as a staging ground for the incursions in two Russian border areas. Kursk, of course, is the best known of these, going back to August of last year. Now, so for Russia to take in hand Kharkiv Oblast or province is a security issue of the first importance, and therefore they are very keen to stress their gains. Let us remember that Kharkiv, that is the city of the city for which the province has the same name, Kharkiv city is the second largest city in Ukraine. It also is basically a Russian-speaking city. So the Russian armed forces are being very cautious in the way they are taking over this oblast and hoping to subjugate the city. They don't want to cause extensive civilian casualties because the civilians who would suffer are basically Russian speakers.
Gilbert, I also wanted to get your reaction to the diplomatic developments today, mainly being the one that Ukraine will obtain up to 100 French-made Rafale warplanes over the next 10 years under a deal signed today. Also, of course, in the deal are air defense systems, munitions and drones, which were signed into in a letter of intent by Zelensky and Macron. Going into the winter months, is this going to make any difference to Ukraine's war effort?
In terms of morale, yes. In terms of actual military improvement of the situation, of course, no. 10 years is a long time for delivery of these Rafales, and who knows what kind of Ukraine will exist 3 months, 6 months, a year from now, not to mention 10 years from now. But in the terms of morale and the evident support, I would say desperate support of Western European countries for Ukraine and for Mr. Zelensky's regime, this is, of course, significant, as significant in his own way as the deal which Mr. Zelensky reached over the weekend with his Greek counterparts for supply of natural gas. So that is essentially liquefied natural gas coming from the United States through a northern corridor from Greece up into Ukraine, so that Ukraine will have some supply of gas after Russia has virtually destroyed its own gas production.
Yes, Gilbert, Dr. O, do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of Europe. Finland's President Alexander Stubb has expressed hope that European Union leaders will find solutions to address Belgium's concerns over using frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine. During a joint press conference with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, Stubb said he plans to meet with Belgium's Prime Minister Bart de Wever. Let's listen in to what Stubb has said.
When it comes to funding Ukraine, it seems rather clear that there are three options. The first one is that EU member states, or NATO member states for that matter, pay directly, either by taking more loans or using current reserves. The second option is the mutualization of debt on a European level, as was done with Next Generation Europe and with SAFE. And the third option, of course, is the use of the immobilized assets. I will discuss these matters today with Belgium's Prime Minister. I think a lot of European leaders have understood the concerns that Belgium has in this situation, both political and legal. And I hope that when leaders start moving towards the European Council of December, that solutions will be found, because it is of utmost importance that we continue to fund Ukraine in its fight for its existence and survival.
Gilbert joins us from Brussels. Gilbert, Belgium is blocking the EU's plan to use these frozen Russian assets. What is Belgium concerned about? Legal fallout, Russian retaliation, or economic exposure?
All three. The points that Mr. Stubb was making were precisely repeating remarks made by Ursula von der Leyen a week ago. This was not his speech. He took up her speech and made it his own. Considering the news that we've discussed a couple of minutes ago, the question of what happens to Russian frozen assets that are in Euroclear in Belgium, whether they can be used in one way or another to provide funding for the war effort in Ukraine over the next 2 years, that is of cardinal importance. Frankly speaking, as it looks now, if Mr. De Wever, the Prime Minister of Belgium, cannot be persuaded that the Europeans, his European colleagues, are standing by him and will share the risks that Belgium faces, if that does not happen, then I think a collapse of the Ukrainian war effort is predictable in the foreseeable future, meaning the next 6 months, shall we say, because Rafale aircraft from France will do no good if the Ukrainian army is not being paid because there's no money. And that is a situation. The country is desperate, they need the funds. Europe doesn't have the money. Looking at the three options that Mr. Stubb mentioned, Europe does not have the money, the reserves to make available to Belgium, to Russia. Its only easy solution is confiscating, essentially stealing, the Russian assets that are now parked in Euroclear under sanctions. Belgium's Prime Minister is unlike the other 26 European member states, or at least 25 of them, in that he is genuinely concerned with the welfare of his country and not with ideology. He is a nationalist. He is a pocketbook nationalist, not an ethnic nationalist. And that tells you the whole story. He's concerned about the welfare, the economic prosperity of Belgium, and a case of taking 140 billion euros of Russian assets that are now in Belgian hands and giving them over to Ukraine would put Belgium in every possible liability, legal liability, and a possible military response from Russia. I am told by Flemish journalists that Mr. De Wever is shaking in his boots. He also knows about Russian Oreshniks, and he wouldn't like to see them headed for Brussels.
Yes, Gilbert, of course, as you've said, the European Union is made up of 27 countries, all with different governments. If the EU can't agree internally on how to use Moscow's frozen funds, does that signal weakening political will behind Ukraine?
Absolutely. The game will be up. The game will be up not on the battlefield, because despite all the cheerleading by so many visible people in the alternative media in the West, the reality is that victory on the battlefield for the Russians is not going to happen tomorrow, as I've made plain earlier. The political collapse of Ukraine is far more probable. If there's no money to pay the officials in the army, the country will collapse. And if Europe cannot mobilize behind Mr. De Wever and behind Belgium to ensure that his country alone will not be exposed to Russian vengeance, then the game is up.
Yeah, and do you believe that Russia would retaliate if the EU ultimately transfers revenue from frozen assets to Ukraine? Many critics say this is against international law.
Oh, it isn't against international law. As Mr. De Wever himself said in his speech 2 weeks ago, in which he refused to go along with the pressure of his colleagues, even in World War II, there was no effort to confiscate the state assets of the belligerent countries. Therefore, for Europe now to do that to Russian assets, as is being discussed and as is being prioritized by von der Leyen, is a precedent, a very dangerous precedent. Normally, confiscation of state assets is possible only in a state of war. That's international law.
Yes, Gilbert Doctorow, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World, and thank you for taking the time. We now move on, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has expressed his gratitude as he and French President Emmanuel Macron signed an accord in Paris, calling the agreement a historic one. According to the agreement, Ukraine will be purchasing around 100 Rafale jets, as well as anti-air defences and drones from France, providing a crucial boost to Ukraine's war effort amid Russian attacks and recent battlefield setbacks. Zelensky, after signing the letter of intent with French President Emmanuel Macron at the Villa Coublay Air Force Base in southwest of Paris, says that they will have the greatest air defence system with President Macron's help. Meanwhile, Macron says that some of the deliveries of drones, interceptor drones and guided bombs would come in the very short term, with manufacturing commitments made for the coming 3 years. Let's listen in to President Zelensky.
Україна зможе отримати 100 літаків Рафаль F-4, дуже сильні французькі радари, 8 систем протиповітряної оборони, самці, по 6 пускових. Ну це деталі, напевно, це для когось технічні деталі, а для нас це важливо. Кожна пускова, все це захист кожного життя. Це дуже важливо. Необхідні для нашого захисту ракети та керовані. Це стратегічна домовленість, яка працюватиме 10 років від наступного року. Ми розуміємо всі основи цієї домовленості. Політичні, фінансові, промислові. Це історична угода. Дуже цінно, що Франція робить такий крок для досягнення реальної гарантованої безпеки в Європі. Є сильний пакет оборони, підтримки України, є Рафалі, і тут це, я впевнений, історичне рішення. А що нас можна посилювати? Я вам скажу, що це дуже серйозний флот, який будуємо ми для України. Ми говоримо про нове покоління самці. Ми працюємо з самці, дякую Еммануелю. І нове покоління – це дуже серйозний рівень. Ви знаєте, що ми працюємо з патріотами проти балістики. Новий рівень самці – це проти.
We move on, and China says that it has made progress in financial and economic areas with Germany after Finance Minister Lars Klingbeil met Vice Premier He Lifeng for the German-Chinese financial dialogue in Beijing. China's Vice Premier, while speaking at a news conference, reaffirmed the importance of prioritising the development of a comprehensive strategic partnership between China and Germany, making clear the direction and focus for future in-depth cooperation. Let's listen in to Vice Premier Li Haifeng.
通过多双边渠道加强宏观经济政策的协调，推动两国和全球经济的增长，促进全球的金融稳定。双方强调，愿共同维护全球产业链、供应链的安全稳定，将大力维护和加强全球产业链、供应链，包括稀土在内的稳定安全，将致力于维护多边主义，反对单边主义、保护主义，反对脱钩断链。两国金融机构在贸易、投资、中小企业、航运金融等领域加强合作。双方在对话后举行了中德金融界圆桌会议，就加强金融市场的务实合作达成了积极的共识。双方认同各国分歧与争端应当通过对话协商和平解决，同意通过加强对话，共同应对当前全球面临的挑战。
Meanwhile, Klingbeil says that Germany addressed the topic of Chinese overcapacity in key sectors such as steel, solar and electric mobility during talks at the China-Germany financial dialogue. Klingbeil became the first representative of the new coalition government of Germany to visit China. Ties between the two industrial powerhouses have been strained over Chinese export curbs on chips and rare earths in particular, causing major disruptions for German firms. Let's listen in to Minister Klingbeil.
Für Deutschland und für Europa will ich klar sagen, wir setzen auf offene Märkte und wir setzen auf faire Wettbewerbsbedingungen. Wir scheuen den Wettbewerb nicht, aber klar ist auch, er muss fair sein. Ein zentrales Thema ist für mich der Zugang zu kritischen Rohstoffen. Ich habe heute deutlich gemacht, dass wir hier für deutsche und für europäische Unternehmen Verlässlichkeit und Stabilität brauchen, dass die ungerechtfertigte Anwendung von Exportkontrollen eine ernsthafte Bedrohung für die Weltwirtschaft darstellt. Ich habe in meinen heutigen Gesprächen die Zusage der chinesischen Seite erhalten, dass deutsche und europäische Sorgen über die Ausfuhrbeschränkungen bei seltenen Erden und bei kritischen Rohstoffen, dass sie ernst genommen werden und dass wir gemeinsame Lösungen im Sinne eines verlässlichen Zugangs und im Sinne verlässlicher Lieferketten finden wollen. Wir haben auch über die Überkapazitäten in Schlüsselsektoren wie Stahl, Solar- oder Elektromobilität diskutiert. Wir sehen hier von deutscher Seite einen fairen Wettbewerb gefährdet und sehen auch, dass Industriearbeitsplätze und Arbeitsplätze außerhalb Chinas auch bei uns in Deutschland gefährdet sind. Ich habe betont, dass es gemeinsame Aufgabe sein sollte, den Abbau dieser Überkapazitäten anzugehen und damit auch für stabile Wettbewerbsbedingungen zu sorgen. Ich will hier betonen, dass China ein zentraler globaler Akteur ist, politisch, wirtschaftlich, technologisch. Und umso wichtiger ist es, durch persönliche Begegnungen dann auch mit China zu reden, statt nur über China zu sprechen. Das ist heute geschehen und das werden wir in den kommenden Tagen weiter.
Stay with us next as we move over to the Middle East. And Israeli far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has called on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to take drastic actions against Palestinian leadership if the United Nations endorses the recognition of a Palestinian state. Ben-Gvir urged Netanyahu to order targeted assassinations of senior Palestinian Authority officials and to arrest Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in response to the potential move by the United Nations. Let's take a listen in.
בימים האחרונים אנחנו עדים לשובו של השיח סביב הקמת מדינה פלסטינאית. היוזמה הזאת עולה בכל פעם באופן שונה. היום היא עלולה לקבל דחיפה נוספת בהצעה שעולה במועצת הביטחון של האו"ם, תחת נוסח של נתיב מסומן לאותה מדינה. ובכן צריך להגיד את הדברים כהווייתם בצורה הכי ברורה. לעם הזה, לעם המומצא, שמכונה עם פלסטיני, אסור אסור שתהיה לו מדינה. אם הם יאיצו את ההכרה במדינה המומצאת הזאת, אם האו"ם יכיר בדבר הזה, אתה, אדוני ראש הממשלה, צריך להורות על סיכולים ממוקדים של בכירי הרשות, שהם מחבלים לכל דבר, לכל עניין, ואתה, אדוני ראש הממשלה, צריך להורות על מעצרו של אבו מאזן. יש לנו בכלא קציעות תא מוכן עבורו, לקבל תנאים כמו של כל המחבלים בבתי הכלא, ואני קורא לראש הממשלה, תעצור את אבו מאזן, אני אטפל בו.
The UN Security Council is scheduled to vote on a US-backed resolution that supports Donald Trump's Gaza peace plan. Unlike previous versions, this draft includes language that recognizes the possibility of a future Palestinian state, marking a significant shift in the diplomatic landscape. The resolution has been a source of controversy, particularly among Israeli hardliners who view any recognition of Palestinian statehood as a threat to Israeli security. Joining us now is Andrew Latham. He is an international relations expert and he joins us live from Minneapolis. Your reaction to Itamar Ben-Gvir, Israel's national security advisor, and his calls for the assassination of Palestinian Authority officials if this UN resolution moves forward?
Well, unfortunately, it's hardly surprising. He's playing to his base, and that base looks very unfavorably at any prospect, however remote, of a Palestinian state that might bump up against the Jewish state of Israel. But there's no doubt in my mind that he also believes this. He's not just catering to or pandering to his base, he's part of his own base. And for that base, even the remote prospect of a Palestinian state is anathema. They simply won't abide it. And that's why the rhetoric has ramped up the way it has.
Indeed, Andrew, thank you very much. Do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of the Middle East. And next, Palestinian Deputy Foreign Minister Omar Awadallah has called for international intervention to block an Israeli bill proposing the death penalty for those convicted of acts of terrorism. Let's listen.
لذلك هناك رسائل بالفعل تم إرسالها إلى كل وزراء الخارجية في كل دول العالم في الحديث عن قانون الأسرى وإعدام الأسرى الفلسطينيين ومطالبة هذه الدول بالتحرك بشكل سريع لوقف هذا القانون، بالإضافة إلى الشهادات المروعة التي سمعنا عنها وتابعناها ووثقناها ستقدم وقدمت جزء منها إلى ليس فقط المحاكم الدولية بل إلى الجهات الدولية كالمقررين الخاصين ولجان التحقيق الدولية. هناك We will be using all the available diplomatic, legal and political tools to bring the perpetrators of the crime of torture against our prisoners, of the crime of sexual abuse, of the crimes of rape that we documented, and all the organizations in Palestine already documented these testimonies. We will be following this track legally, politically and diplomatically.
The bill, backed by far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, targets individuals accused of deadly attacks on Israelis, particularly Palestinians. The bill has passed the first reading in the Knesset and must go through 2 more readings before becoming law. Palestinian officials have sent urgent letters to global leaders urging them to take swift action against the proposed law. Andrew, of course, we saw this law passed through its first stage just a few days ago, which obviously led to Itamar Ben-Gvir even handing out sweets to members of the Knesset after it passed through. Israel's proposed death penalty bill for terrorism suspects has, of course, drawn sharp criticism. Why does the government think that this is the right time to pass such a law?
Making some concessions under this Trump peace plan, ceasefire/peace plan. And again, has to be concerned, I think, about the coalition of which the Israeli right is represented by Ben-Gvir and others, that they're not going soft on Palestinian terrorism. that force will be met with force, as it were, and that this signals to their base, but also to the broader population and also to the Palestinian population, that we're not going soft. If you perpetrate these crimes against us, we will retaliate in the harshest way possible, the death sentence. Needs to be said, it still has to go through 2 more readings. The first reading in British parliamentary tradition is very loosey-goosey, it's very nebulous, it's not about the details. And of course, we always know where to look for the devil. It's always in the details. So second reading and then final reading will really reveal if this has traction or if this is just showmanship.
Yes, Andrew Latham, thank you very much, as always, for joining us here on NewsX World. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour, but keep following us here for more world news updates. Thank you.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reforms, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome viewers, I'm Pia and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World, and here are the key headlines. US President Donald Trump has called on House Republicans to support releasing the Jeffrey Epstein files, reversing his previous opposition. The House is expected to vote on making the documents public, which could include records on Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell and others. Donald Trump has stated that he could authorize US military strikes in Mexico if needed to combat drug cartels. He has emphasized his tough stance on stopping illegal drug flow, though it's unclear if such action will be taken. Trump has stated that he would approve legislation imposing sanctions on countries trading with Russia as long as he retains ultimate control. Lawmakers have backed the bill while the White House continues efforts to negotiate to bring an end to the war. A Russian missile strike has killed one in Kharkiv's Berestyn and wounded at least 9 people. Meanwhile, Russia says its air defenses shot down 31 Ukrainian drones overnight. Meanwhile, in Donetsk, Ukrainian attacks hit 2 power stations, causing widespread outages. Donald Trump celebrated the UN Security Council's vote backing his Gaza peace plan with 30 nations in favor and no vetoes. The plan calls for establishing a board of peace with global leaders and an international stabilization force. Trump has stated he plans to approve Saudi Arabia's request to buy up to 48 US-made F-35 fighter jets, a potential multi-billion-dollar deal ahead of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's visit to Washington. North Korea has slammed the US-South Korea fact sheet as confrontational, warning of countermeasures. Kim Jong-un criticized Seoul's nuclear submarine plans and alleged US control over the region. Meanwhile, South Korea stressed it has no hostile intent towards the North. Japan has warned citizens in China to heighten safety as Taiwan-related tensions spike, citing rising anti-Japan sentiment. The embassy in Beijing has urged avoiding crowds and staying alert. Meanwhile, the US has withdrawn a missile system from Japan as the Beijing-Tokyo dispute deepens. Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. US President Donald Trump has indicated that he would be open to authorizing US military strikes on Mexican soil if necessary to combat drug cartels. During a press briefing at the White House, Trump responded to a reporter's question about taking military action. This highlights his strong stance on combating the flow of illegal drugs into the United States, though it remains unclear whether such actions would be pursued. Listen in.
Would I launch strikes in Mexico to stop drugs? It's okay with me. Whatever we have to do to stop drugs. Mexico is, look, I looked at Mexico City over the weekend. There's some big problems over there. If we had to, would we do there what we've done to the waterways? You know, there's almost no drugs coming in through our waterways anymore.
Then, of course, we've heard what Donald Trump has had to say. He has, in fact, stated that he is open to carrying out strikes in Mexico in order to curb the flow of illegal drugs, the transnational shipment of drugs. Of course, it's not clear yet whether he would do so and how Mexico would respond to this as well. But as of now, this is a fresh statement that has come in from Donald Trump. He was, of course, speaking at a press briefing at the White House. A reporter had asked him about taking possible military action. We do know what's taking place in Venezuela, off its coast, in the Caribbean, in the Pacific as well. There have already been numerous strikes on certain boats. More than 70 people have now been killed in these strikes. The US maintains that it's doing so in order to combat the drug menace, the shipment of drugs, specifically cocaine, from Latin American countries into its soil. This, of course, has not gone down well with Venezuela as well as neighboring Colombia. With us on the broadcast is Professor Madhav Nalapad, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. As I mentioned earlier, we've already seen certain strikes take place in the Caribbean, in the Pacific as well, with regards to the US's position to combat the flow of drugs into the United States of America. Trump now stating that he is open to taking military action in Mexico as well. Is it likely that he's going to follow through with this statement?
Look, I would doubt it. Mexico is a border state with the United States. Mm-hmm. Mexico has got immense soft power in the United States as a consequence of a very vibrant Mexican-American community. And I would frankly feel that although Trump may want to do it, I hope that cooler minds will prevail on him in his administration and prevent this from happening. Because should it happen, it would create a real crisis in the northern hemisphere, and a real crisis involving one of America's closest commercial and security partners. President Gloria Sheinbaum is doing her best, and I think Trump should help her, and Trump should not try and become a kind of a regional policeman, in fact, a global policeman. I thought, from his campaign declarations that this is the last thing he wanted to do, but it seems now he's been trying to don the garb of a global policeman. So very honestly, I would say it would be extremely unwise on the part of President Trump to launch strikes on Mexican territory, whether sea space or land space or air space, and I do hope that he will not do so. Thank you.
Indeed, sir, requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking some crucial updates, this time from within Mexico. We're now learning that Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has now blamed the opposition politicians as well as violent groups and an international social media campaign for the recent protests against her government, which has resulted in over 100 injuries in clashes that took place outside the National Palace. Now, during a conference, Sheinbaum stated that her government is not going to fall for the provocation, dismissing the protests as orchestrated deliberately in order to destabilize her administration. The unrest has, of course, come amid ongoing political tensions in Mexico, with critics accusing her government of failing to address key issues. Listen in.
La gran mayoría de los que marcharon el sábado no eran jóvenes de la generación Z. Sí había algunos jóvenes, pero la mayoría no eran jóvenes. Vimos caras muy conocidas de los que marcharon con la marea rosa. No vamos a caer en la provocación. Las y los mexicanos no quieren la violencia. Bueno, una supuesta marcha que llama contra la violencia y utiliza la violencia. Entonces no vamos a caer en la provocación. No se debe caer en la provocación. Porque lo que buscan es estas imágenes de represión.
Right, there of course we'd seen these clashes take place earlier. These are certain Generation Z style protests that gained momentum in the city, especially amid rising anger over certain high-profile killings that have taken place. The most recent inclusion of to the contentious pool was the 1st November assassination of Carlos Albertos Manzo Rodriguez, the mayor of Uruapan in Michoacan state. Of course, the protests, as the security chief of Mexico City had to state, protests started out peacefully, but a group of hooded individuals began to commit acts of violence. Of course, you can see in those visuals over there, the National Palace was also stormed, where Sheinbaum lives. In fact, the protesters, the demonstrators had torn down the metal fences around the National Palace. They ended up clashing with riot police as well. The police then resorted to deploying tear gas, making matters even worse. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus to more developments coming in. We're now learning that US President Donald Trump has emphasized his desire to knock out drug factories while keeping options open for further actions. He's mentioned that he supports an aggressive action against drug cartels and narcotics production in Colombia. Listen in.
We have nobody coming in through our southern border, but we know exactly how they get their things here, how they get the drugs here. Fentanyl, cocaine. Colombia has cocaine factories where they make cocaine. Would I knock out those factories? I would be proud to do it personally. I didn't say I'm doing it, but I would be proud to do it because we're going to save millions of lives by doing it.
Shifting focus away from what's taking place in the Americas to what's happening in the United Kingdom. Britain has now stated that it would make refugee status temporary and speed up the deportation of those who arrive illegally. In what the centre-left Labour government says is the most sweeping asylum policy overhaul of modern times, British Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has announced changes that include quadrupling to 20 years the time refugees will have to wait to settle permanently. The government has also threatened visa bans on Angola, Namibia and the Democratic Republic of Congo unless those countries accepted the return of illegal migrants and criminals. Mahmoud has outlined changes to how the European Convention on Human Rights should be interpreted by UK courts to give the government greater control over who can remain in Britain. Listen in to what she had to say.
Outside of the most exceptional circumstances, family reunion will not be possible, with a refugee only able to bring family over if they have joined a work and study route and if qualifying tests are met. We will now also remove the 2005 legislation that created a duty to support asylum seekers, reverting to a legal power to do so instead. While we will continue to support those who play by the rules, those who do not, be that through criminality or antisocial behaviour, can have their support removed. We will also remove our duty to support those who have a right to work. It is right that those who do receive support pay for it if they can. So those with income or assets will have to contribute to the cost.
Let's in fact take a look at what basically is under the new plan as Shabana Mahmood has outlined over there. The UK's golden ticket for asylum seekers will be ending soon. Mahmood is due to lay out the policy and of course apart from this the refugee status period will also be reduced. Currently people get refugee status for 5 years, after which they can apply for indefinite leave to remain and eventually citizenship. However, she has stated that the ministry would cut the length of refugee status to 30 months and that protection will be regularly reviewed and refugees will be forced to return to their home countries once they are deemed safe. The ministry has also stated that it intends to make those refugees who are granted asylum wait 20 years before applying to be allowed to live in the UK long term. Of course, asylum claims in Britain are at a record high. Polls suggest that immigration has overtaken the economy as a top concern that voters have. In fact, some 109,343 people claimed asylum in the United Kingdom in the year ending March 2025. This is a 17-year rise in the previous year, 6% above the 2002 peak for 103,081. Meanwhile, the new laws would make it less attractive for irregular refugees. The Home Office has stated that the reforms would make it less attractive for the irregular migrants and refugees to come to the UK and make it easier to remove those already in the country. A statutory legal duty to provide support to asylum seekers introduced in a 2005 law would also be revoked. This basically means that housing, weekly financial allowances would no longer be guaranteed for asylum seekers. With us on the broadcast is Ms. Shruti Das-Gupta, Foreign Affairs expert, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. I, of course, tried to put all the pieces together of what exactly does this particular overhaul consist of. But what are the implications for the United Kingdom, particularly the political landscape? So far, we've been seeing it's the Tories who've been raising this issue rather vociferously, and now it seems the Labour government is buckling under pressure to act on this front.
You're absolutely right, because they are all looking at immigration as a particularly difficult problem at the hands of UK because of the previous Liberal governments and their policies. Let's look at a few numbers to kind of clarify all of this beyond the numbers that you shared of the number of the spikes in the number of refugees seeking asylum in UK. Its population today is mentioned in 2024 was mentioned about 69 million. And last year, on the previous year, 2023, was 68 million. So that is a rise in 1 million in a year. That itself is not supported by its very low birth rate. The birth rate of UK is 1.44, which is below the population replacement rate. So basically, UK is facing a problem of its own citizens being replaced by asylum seekers. And soon, if I look at today, like UK has in 2021, white, British, UK people were about 81%. In 2011, this percentage was 86%. So a population demographic change is happening in UK thanks to these policies of asylum seeking. They have been exploited by the people who are claiming asylum in UK to like right of family life, right of asylum seeking, and many other smaller articles of those particular policies to ensure that they live a very healthy, happy life while away from the zones of conflict that they claim they have sought asylum from. So what this now problem is that maybe the problem in those particular zones are solved, but the people who sought asylum are still now part of UK's system and they are supported by the government. They need not work. So there are a lot of problems that UK, with a low GDP, with low birth rates, with a population replacement rate that is happening at an alarming level, is facing a moral dilemma of how to ensure that its goodwill is not exploited in the name of asylum seeking. So the numbers that we have looked at shows that there is definitely a problem at hand. Whether it was the Conservatives who were kind of talking about it earlier and now we have the Labour government talking about it, there are definitely a lot of people who are thinking on how to raise problems. The last time Rishi Sunak tried to end the population replacement game and the immigration problem through its Rwanda plan, the UK lost 700 million euros, if I'm not wrong, because they had to pay Rwanda to build those asylum centers, which are never used. In fact, as of March 2025, Rwanda is demanding more money for the amount that they have spent on building those centers, and it was part of the document signed by these two nations that UK will fund it. So there is a lot that UK is bleeding in the name of giving asylum and refuge, and a lot of people are misusing it and are happily sitting on state-funded livelihoods rather than going and being part of an active community, contributing to UK economy and being an asset to the nation that has given them asylum.
Absolutely, ma'am. Requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking some other very crucial developments. We're now learning that the United Nations is calling Bangladesh's recent court ruling an important moment for victims after ousted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was found guilty on 3 counts, including incitement, ordering killings and failing to prevent atrocities during last year's anti-government uprising. A UN report estimates that up to 1,400 people were killed and thousands more were wounded during the demonstrations. Hasina, who fled to neighboring India in August 2024, was sentenced to death in absentia at the conclusion of a months-long trial. Listen in to what was said.
The handing down of verdicts today by the International Crimes Tribunal against Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and the former Home Minister on charges of crimes against humanity is an important moment for the victims of grave human rights violations committed during the suppression of protests last year. While we were not privy to the conduct of this trial, we have consistently advocated for all accountability proceedings, especially on charges of international crimes, to unquestionably meet international standards of due process and fair trial. This is particularly vital when, as was the case here, the trials have been conducted in absentia and led to a capital punishment sentence. We also regret the imposition of the death penalty, which we oppose in all circumstances.
All right, that of course statement by the United Nations stating that it's an important moment for the victims, but also stating that while it's not privy to the conduct of the trial, capital punishment was given in absentia and it opposes the death penalty, which is of course its regular stance. Still with us on the broadcast is Ms. Shruti Dasgupta, Foreign Affairs expert. I want to understand for you, what does this this verdict, not just this verdict, but also what happened in the run-up to it, as well as what's now happening in Bangladesh today. Tell us about where the country is now heading towards.
Well, right now, Bangladesh is under lockdown. There have been riots in various parts. Hasina's party members, or at least former party members and supporters, are on the roads and they are protesting against the verdict. So that just shows that Hasina is probably not as unpopular as the Yunus regime would like to paint her to be. That is one of the things that we are knowing about Bangladesh. What happened yesterday was a travesty of law. Why? Because the ICT tribunal, which was formed under the 1973 law by Bangladesh, which was kept in abeyance till 2009, and then when it was reinstated in 2012, there was a particular amendment that was made to this that stated that in absentia, this court of law will not function. So the very fact that they did a trial on her and the Home Minister in absentia is a violation of the ICT tribunal's policies itself. So I understand that this particular tribunal is illegal by the Constitution of Bangladesh itself. This cannot be amended by Yunus regime. It cannot be ignored by Yunus regime because it is an interim government. It does not have the people's verdict to change the law. And even if it is wanting to change the law, they will have to run an election, win public mandate, come to power, run any changes they want to make to this particular law or constitution via both houses of government, and then they can probably run a case on her in absentia so that they can give her a verdict. So the verdict in itself is null and void according to the law of Bangladesh and under which the ICT tribunal functions. The verdict they passed was of death penalty, which is of course another extreme of the other side. What was happening on the day that this verdict was passed? The Yunus regime themselves had declared a shoot-on-sight order for people who were protesting in favor of Sheikh Hasina. This was something similar to what Sheikh Hasina did about a year back when she issued orders that led to the death and injury of so many people. So sometimes when you're in power and you want to hold on to power, you pass edicts that end up in loss of life. And that is regrettable, and people should be held accountable. But not the way Yunus regime has done it, not the way the student government has done it. They have violated the very principles of the constitution that they promised to uphold. They have not been able to bring peace and prosperity to Bangladesh. And I do not think that the upcoming elections in 2026 February would be held peacefully, because Awami League is still on the roads and streets demanding its right to be recognized as a party, which it was banned immediately after Yunus came to power in Bangladesh. And so they want their political entity to be recognized. They want to be able to fight elections and show to the world and to the people who have ousted Hasina that Hasina and her supporters are still in majority, and they would rather run the nation the way she did, where it was still a nation profiting and looking like a gem in the South Asia, rather than the current regime, which is riddled with problems and is unable to even pay its electricity bills.
Absolutely, ma'am. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, putting all of this into context and sharing your analysis with us on NewsX World. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus to more news coming in, this time from Chile. We're now learning that Chilean residents have expressed mixed opinions ahead of a runoff election that will see them choose between a Communist Party member and an ultra-conservative candidate. With nearly all ballots tallied, Jeanette Jara, the former Labour minister and the first Communist Party member to be a finalist for the Chilean presidency, is holding 27% of the vote versus 24% for the far-right candidate, Jose Antonio Cast, a tight margin that, of course, highlights deep political divisions in the country. Listen in to how Chileans have reacted.
Claro, es que en verdad son los dos muy extremos y la candidata que es Jara, si no me equivoco, también trató de retractarse, como no, ya no soy del Partido Comunista, sino voy a ser de otro partido, y es como, no, y el otro es republicano, entonces son como dos extremos igual complicados, y a mí que no soy ni de uno ni de otro, es súper difícil.
En Chile igual hay todo un tema todavía con el comunismo, porque venimos tenemos una historia con eso, y yo creo que mucha gente no quiere repetirlo. Aunque sabemos que no es exactamente lo mismo, la experiencia del Partido Comunista en cualquier otro lado del mundo ha sido nefasta, y creo que si bien hay gente que todavía cree que pueden funcionar, yo creo que la mayoría de la gente cree que no. Y lo más probable es que la gente se termine decantando más por el lado más conservador, porque también hay un tema con la seguridad.
Meanwhile, Zara has attacked her far-right rival Kast. She has called him an authoritarian figure and has added that he has to settle to show for his 16 years as a member of parliament. Take a look.
Yo encuentro que es una persona autoritaria, que es una persona que denota al que piensa distinto, que es una persona que estuvo 16 años en la Cámara de Diputados y no se conoce ninguna ley en la cual Chile haya logrado avanzar, y que su estilo es oponerse a todo, y que como yo sí he estado en gobierno, sé que otra cosa es con guitarra, ¿no?
In other news, a powerful atmospheric river has swept through California, leaving at least 6 dead and causing widespread damage. Thunderstorms continue in Los Angeles County, raising mudslide risks, especially in areas recently hit by wildfires. In Altadena, a vehicle was crushed under a fallen tree while a gas station canopy collapsed in San Diego. Near Palm Springs, meanwhile, cars were trapped in mud and firefighters rescued a man stranded above a channel in Buena Park. The National Weather Service in the United States has issued warnings of flash floods and mudslides, urging residents in fire-affected areas to stay alert. Well, viewers, due to paucity of time, this is all we have for this particular bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on NewsX World.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome, viewers. I am Pia and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World, and here are the key headlines. US President Donald Trump has called on House Republicans to support releasing the Jeffrey Epstein files, reversing his previous opposition. The House is expected to vote on the making of the documents public, which could include records on Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell and others. Donald Trump has stated that he would approve legislation imposing sanctions on countries trading with Russia as long as he retains ultimate control. Lawmakers have backed the bill while the White House continues efforts to negotiate an end to the war between Russia and Ukraine. A Russian missile strike has killed one in Kharkiv's Berestyn and wounded at least 9 people. Meanwhile, Russia says its air defenses shot down 31 Ukrainian drones overnight. In Donetsk, Ukrainian attacks have hit 2 power plants, causing widespread outages. US President Donald Trump has stated that he plans to approve Saudi Arabia's request to buy up to 48 US-made F-35 fighter jets, a potential multi-billion-dollar deal ahead of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's visit to Washington. A civil nuclear cooperation framework will also be signed. North Korea has slammed the US-South Korea fact sheet as confrontational, warning of countermeasures. Kim Jong-un has criticized Seoul's nuclear submarine plans and alleged US control over the region. Meanwhile, South Korea stressed that it has no hostile intent towards the North. Japan has warned its citizens in China to heighten safety as Taiwan-related tensions spike, citing rising anti-Japan sentiment. The embassy in Beijing has urged avoiding crowds and staying alert. Meanwhile, the US has withdrawn a missile system from Japan as the Beijing-Tokyo dispute deepens. Donald Trump has stated that he will speak with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, who he is accused of releasing prisoners into the US. Maduro has welcomed face-to-face dialogue and stressed diplomacy over force. Meanwhile, Trinidad's Prime Minister stated that the country won't allow its territory for attacks on Venezuela. China and Vietnam will conduct a joint naval patrol in the Beibu Gulf on the 19th and 20th of November to boost maritime security, enhance communication, and strengthen mutual trust between their naval forces, highlighting efforts to maintain regional stability. Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. US President Donald Trump has expressed support for House Republicans' efforts to release additional files related to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, calling it a Democrat problem and accusing prominent Democrats, including former President Bill Clinton, of having ties to Epstein. Now, Trump's endorsement of this push has come after a petition from House Republicans that gathered enough support to force a vote on the matter, a rare instance of GOP lawmakers defying the president's wishes. Listen in to what Trump had to say.
President, something you posted on Truth Social last night, you urged House Republicans to vote in favor of this Epstein release bill they're going to vote on tomorrow. I just want to be super clear on your position. Do you want to see that pass the Senate? Would you sign that bill if it gets to your desk?
I do want to. Here's what I want. We have nothing to do with Epstein. The Democrats do. All of his friends were Democrats. You look at this Reid Hoffman, you look at Larry Summers, Bill Clinton, they went to his island all the time, and many others, they're all Democrats.
The controversy has reignited attention on the ties between Epstein and several high-profile figures, including Trump, who has maintained that he was unaware of his criminal activities. The House is set to vote on a resolution requiring the Justice Department to release all unclassified files related to the Epstein probe. If passed, the bill would move to the Senate, and if approved, over there, it would be sent to Trump for final approval. Meanwhile, Epstein survivor Alicia Arden has urged the House to pass a resolution criticizing Washington for prioritizing political games over transparency. Listen in.
Appeal to the members of the House. Vote to release these files so that we can finally see who else helped Jeffrey Epstein and who else victimized so many children and adults.
In response to the ongoing scrutiny, former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers has publicly apologized for his past communication with Epstein, stating that he was stepping back from public commitments in an effort to rebuild trust. In response to the growing public demand, survivors of Epstein's abuse, in cooperation with the coalition World Without Exploitation, released a powerful video urging U.S. lawmakers to vote on the resolution to release all remaining files related to the investigation. The video features key survivors who call on the U.S. Congress to take decisive action. With us on the broadcast is Major General Sudhakar Ji. He's a senior geopolitical and strategic expert joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Donald Trump seems to be in quite a soup with regards to these files. The rhetoric has exploded, particularly on social media, with regards to this bill. We're also seeing several Republican lawmakers, including Marjorie Taylor Greene, now coming out and emphasizing that it is time that the FBI declassifies all files related to this. But so far we've seen Trump has been trying to pin the blame on the Democrats. He's been a little evasive when it comes to questions on signing the bill. What sort of impact could we see this have, especially with this MAGA voter base, which has been quite vocal for quite a while to release these particular files?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for getting me for your show. And as regards to the question which you have raised, take your mind back to the election campaigning of Donald Trump 2.0.
Yes.
Repeatedly, time and again, Donald Trump made it as one of the central points to declassify or release the documents related to Epstein, if you recall correctly. And I don't think I'll disrespect my memory. It is the same man who has risen to become the president for the second tenure. Why isn't he releasing? Isn't this double talk and double standard? And I'm his. No, actually, you are very, very diplomatic in your articulation. You have said that he's in soup. I'm saying he's in thick soup. So thick soup, it will lead to a kind of an impeachment. These kind of violations are very serious violations in American Constitution or any other constitution anywhere in the world. It's a very serious thing. His name is there. It is connected. He is connected. So he has to very openly and candidly admit the thing beforehand in order to safeguard or create some kind of a elbow room space to protect himself. And I don't know, it is only he who knows how deeply he was connected and involved in the thing. But to the best of my open source reading, he's definitely into it. And his name has been mentioned number of times. He's taking the alibi of Democrats. Democrats are to be blamed. He's taking the name of Bill Clinton. He's taking XYZ. But unfortunately, his name is also figuring. If his name is not there, then why is he hesitating, holding himself back from disclosing or releasing the document? It will do him good for the sake of, I would say, accountability, for the sake of credibility, as the president who has come back to power for the second time with a laudable mandate and I would say favorable voting in his favor. It will do him good for the sake of the people of America to make America great again. Otherwise, I am sorry and I am very sad to say that he will be doing everything contradictory to make America great again. Back to you, Priya.
Absolutely, sir. Requesting you to stay on with us as we're shifting focus to some further updates we're tracking. The White House has now stated that US President Donald Trump is prepared to sign new legislation imposing sanctions on Russia, but only if he retains final authority over how those sanctions are applied. A senior White House official has confirmed that the US President's position is this itself after Trump told reporters that he was open to Republican-backed efforts targeting countries that would continue doing business with Moscow, especially amid Russia's failure to negotiate a peace agreement with Ukraine. The proposed bill, led by Senator Lindsey Graham and Representative Brian Fitzpatrick, would penalize nations that purchase Russian energy exports. Trump has also suggested lawmakers may add Iran to the measure as well. Still with us on the broadcast is Major General Sudhakarji. Interesting development coming in. We do know that we have seen Donald Trump weaponizing tariffs as a means, in India's case particularly, as far as its import of Russian oil and energy is concerned. But at the same time, the United States continues trading with Russia for key minerals, for fertilizers as well. But nobody seems to be calling out this double standard that the US is engaging in.
Yeah, if that question is for me, I would say we are missing the woods for the trees. He may be putting pressure and putting penalty of 25% additional on India for buying oil. He may be calling out oil. But the hidden agenda of Trump and his administration is to take effective and meaningful measures and prevent de-dollarization. India is one of the countries. There are many countries in the world. We are doing transactions with Russia in non-dollar currencies.
Yes.
So what we are doing in ruble, we're doing in rupee, and we are doing in yuan. So more you do is, for the ease of understanding of our viewers, let me explain. The Indian oil expenditure for 2024 was close to 134. It may be plus minus this side, that side, $134 billion. Out of $134 billion of last year, $75 billion was done, transaction was done in non-dollar currencies. So isn't 75 billion for 1 year, for one country, big enough and a slow process of de-dollarization? It is. So it is actually weakening the dominance. There was a time when the dollar is to dominate 89% as a reserve currency in the geoeconomics, in the global economic order. And now, during pandemic, it went down to 54%. Now I believe it is bounced back to around close to 56, between 56 and 59%. And the domain experts, economic experts, those who specialize on the subject, they have claimed that the day the dollar dominance in the global order as a reserve currency goes down below 50%, that will be the end state of USA as a superpower. Assuming or given the fact that they are running a debt of 37 trillion, yes. $37 trillion of debt, and the resources required to run the normal routine governance in USA is 6 trillion per annum. Their revenue generation is just about 4 trillion. So there is a deficit of 1 trillion here, and they have to pay off the interest servicing is amounting to around 1 trillion. Approximately $3 trillion deficit they have to manage year by year. So how do they generate this kind of fund? So that is the criticality. They are actually trying to put pressure on India, and therefore it is no double standard, double talk. It is all national interest of USA which is being safeguarded, and therefore yesterday only we would have seen in the news that India has been coerced, I would say, it has been forced to actually go in for relaxing the oil deal. The gas, India has never bought LPG from such far off distances. The cost is going to rise. We have always bought LPG from Middle East, always and every time post our independence and creation as a nation. This is for the first time India is doing to please Donald Trump and buying. There is a 10% rise in the expenditure on LPG. Instead of buying from Middle East, we are buying it from USA. This is simply to please Donald Trump and make sure that the transactions are carried out in dollar and we do not indulge in slow poison and incremental poisoning of de-dollarization. This is my understanding, Pia, and for whatever penny is worth that I can contribute to your channel. Back to you, please.
Absolutely, sir. Requesting you to stay on with us. We're tracking some other updates this time regarding what's taking place in Europe as far as the war is concerned. We're now learning that a Russian missile strike has killed a 17-year-old girl and wounded at least 9 others in Ukraine's eastern Kharkiv region. Local authorities say the attack hit the city of Berestyn, while a nearby Dnipro also reported fires after a separate drone strike. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry says air defense units shot down 31 Ukrainian drones overnight. The heaviest activity was reported over the Voronezh and Tambov regions, where 10 drones were intercepted in each area. In the Moscow-backed Donetsk People's Republic, regional leader Denis Pushilin has stated that Ukrainian forces struck the Zuyevskaya and Stryobishevskaya thermal power plants. He's reported widespread outages with boiler houses and filtration stations knocked offline. Still with us on the broadcast is Major General Sudhakarji. Day by day, we're seeing the barrage of attacks targeting energy infrastructure continuing to take place. We've been discussing this especially with winter rolling around the corner. But I wanted to take a little more protracted view of the situation. How do you see this playing out? Because Russia has recently stated that it is open for talks in Istanbul with Ukraine.
It's good. It's very positive. So showing signs of progressive stance, I would say. But the outcome, I know, nothing will happen. Why nothing will happen? Because although, you see, there are two aspects which need to be understood by us, by the viewers. For Putin, ending the war not in terms of Russia or to his advantage, it is going to be geopolitically cost prohibitive. He simply cannot, or Russia as a country cannot afford to lose this war. They have to end the war in terms or as per the requirement, as per the understanding, as per the parameters which have already been etched out on ground and in the mind of the people of Russia and particularly the leader Putin. He is doing a good thing, let me tell you. Putin is very right, because I'm saying this with a lot of conviction and confidence, because the real problem has to be addressed. Now, on the contrary, if you look at the Westerners, they will continue indulging in this kind of drama and rhetorics, talks here, talks there. Every 7-10 days they will come rushing. No. The battle must carry on, because the defense industry is actually relying on it. Because now, you see, 6 out of 10 top defense industries in the world, they belong to USA. When I say deep state of USA, the defense industry managers and the architecture of hierarchy is also part of the deep state. They are apart from others. So their business would go into absolutely grinding halt if the conflicts do not run like this. So this conflict will carry on. Their aim is to bleed Russia to death, which is simply impossible. More pressure, more sanction they impose on Russia, formidable and stronger its economy becomes. Its defense industry from 2 times the size and the speed at which it is to produce the weapons, ammunitions and missiles and other things in comparison to the Western alliance has gone up to 5 to 8 times now. It is much more, it is twice the size and the speed, the rate of what it had during Second World War, by the way. Okay, so that has to be understood. And third and most important thing is missiles like Orange Sheikh, or the latest one, which is nuclear powered, which they carried out tests 14,000 kilometers away. They fired Burevestnik. Burevestnik is a nuclear powered missile, not a nuclear missile which has been, or warhead which has been tested. Also, they tested one a torpedo which is called an underwater drone, and there is no defensive mechanism in the world order which can stop this particular Poseidon underwater in the world today, which Russia has demonstrated. It is again a nuclear power. That is what actually given triggers, jitters to Donald Trump. He's given orders to Pentagon to carry out testing of nuclear weapons despite having imposed self-imposed moratorium for 33 years based on the understanding of CTBT. So that apart, all I'm saying is that Istanbul or no Istanbul, the talks will carry on. We only hope and pray that this mindless conflict must come to an end with some practical solution. Practical solution to me as a military man, I have handled and contributed significantly to such kind of disputes in the past, and I recommend that as is, where is basis is the best answer, which Westerners will never accept. When I say as is, where is basis means the complete firing must freeze. All barrels will be shut. There will be no firing from across either of the stakeholders. Our imaginary line has to be understood, accepted mutually by both the parties. Or neutral party, the stakeholders have to fall back by a couple of kilometers from this imaginary line, and they have to remain sacrosanct and binding, that it will not be violated until such time the next step of ceasefire is not resorted to. And finally, a neutral party has to be there to ensure that the understanding and the commitments made by both the parties for ceasefire and peace and harmony is not violated at any point in time. So unless this thing happens, and I doubt, because there is no leader, technically and legally speaking, Zelensky is not a leader. He has already surpassed his mandate of presidentialship. Now Ukraine should rightfully have an election, which is not allowing. There are cases of corruption against this man. So there are lots of, very complex issues which are connected to one another. Therefore, let this Istanbul talk go. And I only hope and pray that they come to some kind of a conclusion. The issue where it is likely to get stuck here is that even if the agreement takes place, this 20% land which has been already captured under occupation of Russia, if it is based on as is, where is, because I don't see any solution other than this, then the parliament of Ukraine has to ratify this particular loss of territory or given to Russia. It is only parliament. Zelensky has got no power nor authority as a president. A new president has to be elected and represent Ukraine. Then only the peace agreements can be signed and carried forward as a legal, tenable and technical document, meaningfully going to be applicable and applied on the ground by relevant stakeholders across the board. Back to Ipia.
All right, so with that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, sharing your analysis and putting all of this into context for our viewers. On that note, we should focus to more news coming in. US President Donald Trump has stated that he plans to approve the sale of US-made F-35 fighter jets to Saudi Arabia. Trump has made such comments before, and now, of course, he plans to host Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Washington, D.C. So the timing of these statements are very crucial. Saudi Arabia had earlier requested to buy as many as 48 F-35 fighter jets, a potential multi-billion-dollar deal that has cleared a key Pentagon hurdle ahead of MBS's visit. Listen in to what Trump had to say.
Yeah, no, I am planning on doing that. They want to buy it. They've been a great ally. They've got to like us very much. Look at the Iran situation, what we did in terms of obliterating, we obliterated their nuclear capability. Yeah, I will say that we will be doing that. We'll be selling F-35.
Meanwhile, according to reports, the United States will also sign the framework of a civil nuclear cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia during the Crown Prince's visit. With us on the broadcast is Professor Rohan Gunaratne, International Affairs expert, joining us from Singapore. Thank you so much for taking out time to speak to us on NewsX World. At the outset, I wanted to understand from you, if this deal does go ahead and materialize, how could it change the delicate balance of power in the Middle East? We do know that it's Israel that currently has the cutting-edge F-35 fighter jets in its fleet, and no other country in the Middle East does.
You're correct, Pia. Israel is the only country in the Middle East that has the F-35 fighter that has given a qualitative edge in warfighting in the Middle East. That is why Israel has some reservations about the United States selling the F-35 to Saudi Arabia. Of course, President Trump is very much driven by his economic goals. He wants a $600 billion investment from Saudi Arabia to the United States that will boost U.S. economy significantly. So I believe that this deal will go through. Not only that, U.S. and Israel, U.S. and U.S. and Saudi Arabia will strengthen the partnership on AI, because Saudi Arabia also wants advanced chips that will give an edge to Saudi Arabia over other countries in the Middle East. Currently, UAE is leading in that field in artificial intelligence. And finally, I want to tell you that many people have forgotten what happened to Jamal Khashoggi in Turkey.
Yes.
And because time has passed, and I think it is important to recognize Saudi Arabia, it is important to recognize Mohammed bin Salman, because he has modernized Saudi Arabia. He has fought extremism from Saudi Arabia that has radicalized many pockets of Muslims around the world, and we should all support Saudi Arabia's modernization into a modern country in the early 21st century. So I think that there will be very little opposition to MBS, and I think that this is something that is very important and very good for global stability and security.
Indeed, and I also wanted to understand the implications of the civil nuclear agreement. How is that also likely to impact the balance of power? Because we do know that Iran has its own nuclear program that it says is for civilian purposes, but of course there are larger concerns that it could be developing a weapon of its own.
Saudi Arabia is very keen to build a nuclear capability. That may be difficult at this point, but Saudi Arabia has taken the first steps in that by planning to build a civil nuclear capability. So between a civil nuclear capability and a military nuclear capability, the line is very thin. Most countries that have developed civil nuclear capabilities can develop a military nuclear capability if they want to do that. So that is the direction Saudi Arabia is heading. Right now, Saudi Arabia Pakistan has given the nuclear cover. But in the future, I believe that the United States will do that. Saudi Arabia also seeks a very wide-ranging defense and military cooperation agreement with the United States, both defensive and offensive. And that will also happen. That will be a matter of discussion in Washington, D.C. when Trump and MBS meets. There's one reservation, that is Trump wants Saudi Arabia to recognize Israel so that ties will be normalized. Saudi Arabia will join the Abraham Accords. So I believe that all these things will create greater stability and security in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, sir, requesting you to stay on with us as we're shifting focus away from the Middle East towards what's happening in the Caribbean. US President Donald Trump has stated that he will talk to his Venezuelan counterpart, Nicolas Maduro, at some point. Trump has accused Maduro of releasing prisoners into the United States, but has added that he will be speaking to the Venezuelan president. Take a look at his comments.
Look, he's done tremendous damage to our country, primarily because of drugs, but really because we have that problem with other countries too. But more than any other country, the release of prisoners into our country has been a disaster. He's emptied his jails. Others have done that also. He has not been good to the United States. So we'll see what happens. At a certain period of time, I'll be talking.
Meanwhile, Nicolas Maduro has responded to Donald Trump's remarks, stating that his government is open to face-to-face dialogue on diplomatic issues. Maduro has reaffirmed Venezuela's commitment to diplomacy and international law while condemning the use of force or military threats. Listen in.
Ratificamos que solo a través de la diplomacia se deben entender los países libres, los gobiernos, y solo a través del diálogo se deben buscar puntos comunes en temas de interés mutuo. Así que este país está en paz, este país va a continuar en paz y en Estados Unidos el que quiera hablar con Venezuela se hablará. Face to face, cara a cara, sin ningún problema. Lo que no se puede.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Kamala Persad Bissessar of Trinidad and Tobago has emphasized that the Caribbean nation will not allow its territory to be used to launch attacks on Venezuela. The leader has added that the United States has never asked to use the country's territory to attack Venezuela. Professor Rohan Gunaratne still with us on the broadcast. How significant are Donald Trump's remarks? We do know that Washington does not really recognize the Maduro government in Caracas and has been ramping up its efforts to crack down on what it claims are drug peddlers trying to enter the United States from Venezuela. What do you make of Trump's remarks? When is Nicolas Maduro's response to this as well, stating that he's open to dialogue?
So, United States has conducted a number of bombings, attacks against vessels allegedly carrying drugs and criminals from Venezuela to the United States. And of course, the US will continue to do that because US perception is that there is a threat, and it is very likely that it is true because the flow of drugs is largely from Central and Latin America into the United States, and the US has taken a very tough security posture. What is important is Venezuela is very closely allied to Russia and to China and to Iran. And Trump doesn't like that. Trump, in fact, dislikes Maduro because of his geopolitical leanings. So if both these leaders meet, things can change because Trump essentially is a businessman. He's a deal maker. So if Venezuela agrees to Trump's terms, it is very likely that this dispute will come to an end. And of course, the United States and Venezuela will work together to detect and disrupt the flow of drugs and dismantle the criminal networks that pose a threat to the United States. But will that happen? That is the biggest question.
Indeed, and we're also seeing a reaction coming from Trinidad and Tobago, which is located just off the coast of Venezuela. It did in fact host a US warship quite recently, but it has affirmed that it will not allow its territory to be used to carry out an attack on Venezuela. Do you think the administration in Trinidad and Tobago is trying to strike a balance as tensions continue to simmer? Because on one hand,
what we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy.
hello and welcome viewers, I'm Pia and you're watching the Africa Brief on NewsX World, and here are the top headlines. UN aid chief has warned that Al-Fashir is now a crime scene with mass killing, sexual violence and malnourished survivors. The chief has stated that rapid, unhindered aid access is necessary as displaced civilians face starvation and trauma. Nigeria is in talks with the United States after Trump threatened military action over jihadist attacks on Christians. Foreign Minister Yusuf Tuga has stated that discussions now focus on collaborative strategies to address security challenges affecting global interests. South Africa's Foreign Minister Ronald Lamola has stated that the US absence from the Johannesburg G20 summit is nothing unusual. He's also criticized the recent arrival of 153 Palestinians in the country, suggesting that it reflects a broader effort to displace Palestinians from their homes. Ethiopia reports of 3 Marburg virus deaths in the Omo region. 17 suspected cases are under investigation, with WHO and Africa CDC aiding containment. The virus is spreading via bodily fluids, causing severe hemorrhagic symptoms. US President Donald Trump has celebrated the UNSC's vote backing his Gaza peace plan, with 13 nations voting in favor and no vetoes. The plan calls for establishing a board of peace with global leaders and an international stabilization force. Trump has stated that he plans to approve Saudi Arabia's request to buy up to 48 US-made F-35 fighter jets, a potential multi-billion-dollar deal ahead of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's visit to Washington. Donald Trump has called on House Republicans to support releasing the Jeffrey Epstein files, reversing his previous opposition. The House is expected to vote on making the documents public, which could include records on Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and others. Heavy rains in Kenya have caused Lake Naivasha, about 100 kilometers northwest of Nairobi, to overflow, flooding homes and displacing families. Meanwhile, authorities are monitoring the situation and coordinating relief efforts for affected communities. Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. UN Aid Chief Tom Fletcher has warned that conditions in Sudan's Al-Fashir have deteriorated into large-scale atrocities. He has urged immediate and unhindered access for aid agencies as survivors continue to flee the besieged city. This comes as he had earlier visited displacement camps in Tawila and Korma and met with survivors of the conflict during his trip. Listen in to what he had to say.
The commitments I was seeking from the RSF and actually from other parties on the ground are that we get unhindered access to people on the basis of need, and that this is never politicized, that we don't go in, of course, with any military accompaniments and so on, that we are going in under our own steam. I'm not going to somehow stop humanitarian operations and let more people die while I wait for member states, international community to think about blue helmets or other ways of stopping this conflict. I have to deal